Unions at the post office say they'll oppose the plans by the business rescue practitioners there to retrench 6,000 people, for 6,000 people to lose their jobs. The business rescue practitioners also want to shut down 400 branches of the post office. It's had to be bailed out several times. At one point this year, it was actually put into provisional liquidation. Trevor Shaku is the spokesperson for the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Trevor, good afternoon to you. Why do you believe it's wrong to retrench these workers?
We think that the government has to do all in its power to assist the South African Post Office to save these jobs, because we are having an unemployment crisis in our country. Moreover, we have the cost of living crisis that has risen. Now, if we lay off these workers from the post office, and we've seen other retrenchments which have been proposed across the economy, even in the private sector, we think that retrenching workers is wrong and must be averted. And therefore, the government has to assist the South African Post Office to ensure that it saves the jobs and make sure that it returns the business into a healthy, positive state in which it was under. For instance, during the period of Mark Barnes, the CEO, who was able to turn around the South African Post Office between 2016 and 2019. So we think that government has to do all in its power to save the jobs.
Mark Barnes is a capitalist. Do you want him to come back, Trevor?
All businesses are run by capitalists. And even these very businesses which we see under state-owned enterprises, they are run by people who have got managerial skills. Now, if Mark Barnes, for instance, was to return as a CEO of the South African Post Office, he would not be returning as a capitalist, but merely as a manager of a state-owned enterprise. Of course, in this instance, we are merely looking for a better manager. It is clear that the people who have managed the South African Post Office and other state-owned enterprises have not really been managing them better, and that is the reason why they've been inefficient and have been run down, where their liabilities in most instances have grown beyond the assets they've accumulated, leading them into technical and sometimes total liquidations. So those particular problems must be averted by first, I think, fixing the governance and management issues at those particular state-owned enterprises, and later, of course, ensuring that we return them to positive equities and all of that. The second thing is that the state has to play, of course, everything in its power to ensure that it assists these particular organizations, even if it means financially. Now, I'm not advocating for Mark Barnes. What I was just trying to do is to make a reference that we saw the positive equity of the South African Post Office growing from 2017, 18 and 19 to even up to 5 billion rands. And this shows that the management and the governance of that entity during that period was proper. And that's what we need. We are not necessarily looking for the person, but we're looking for a person who can be able to, we're not necessarily looking for Mark Barnes, but we're looking for a person who can be able to run that entity properly and ensure that it returns to positive equity.
So, excuse me, one of the questions, Trevor, I mean, people don't really send letters anymore. The world's changed. What should the post office be doing in the 21st century? What role should it play?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear the other part.
We're in the 21st century. Nobody sends letters anymore. What role should the post office be playing in our society right now?
Sure. So, look, even in the context of the fourth industrial revolution, where we've moved to digital online platforms, the role of the post office will not be dispensed with, because even if you buy online, you will still know those things to be delivered to your house, Comrade Steve. And therefore, the role of the post office is indispensable. Of course, there will be other areas of its operations that will become dormant. For instance, the delivery of letters. The delivery of letters, over time, I think it will be phased out, because we have begun more and more to trust the electronic versions of these letters and no more necessarily the printed versions. So in that instant, the post office might lose, and of course has been suffering even in that regard. But the delivery of parcels, which increasingly are being shipped by cars, buses, and many others between the sellers and the buyers, is going to increase. And we think that the South African Post Office would play a role in that particular space, which is currently growing. And in fact, with the movement of procurement from hard to online, we've seen that there are actually more opportunities that are emerging for the transportation of parcels from the willing sellers to the willing buyers.
So, Trevor, I mean, I think you're probably right, but isn't that business being taken by private couriers already? I mean, anyone starting now, and I mean, there are ways where I think you must be right, and I'm trying desperately not to argue with you, Trevor, because you and I always argue, and I don't know why. I mean, it's fun, but I don't know why. But I mean, like, we've got Amazon coming, for example. They're going to take a lot in the online space, right, which is going to be fun for all of us to watch. I have to say, though, that it seems to me that some of the private operators are probably too entrenched now. You know, the best, most well-run courier business coming in probably still be too far behind.
So there are two things which I think we could go about it. The first one is on the regulatory side. Already there is that regulation that limits the private proprietors to transport certain kinds of goods in terms of weight. So the South African Post Office still has a monopoly in transportation of certain goods which weigh a particular mass. This is the first part, the regulatory part, to preserve the space for for the South African Post Office to operate. And secondly, I think what is happening is that the state can still contest with those. Let's say in the markets which have been opened for private proprietors to be able to operate, and we already have your Take a Lot, we are having Amazon that is coming, as you've mentioned. I think that the state still has an opportunity to play a role there. Remember, in an open market, the business that will win and dominate that particular market is the business that can be able to lower the socially necessary labor time, drive costs, and attract as many customers as possible. And this is just what is going to also play out between Amazon and Take a Lot in that particular space. So we are saying that in addition to the fact that there is the space that exists that has been protected by the regulation for the operation of the South African Post Office, there's nothing stopping the South African Post Office for entering that market which has already been opened to contest with the players in that particular market. And with the necessary governance, necessary management, and the particular efficiency that should and ought to be developed in that particular entity, we think that it stands a chance to even outcompete such particular competitors.
Trevor Shaku, thanks very much indeed from the South African Federation of Trade Unions. I do appreciate the time.